talk about the leading company, what is called Strodtbeck and Company Limited from USA. Strodtbeck and Company Limited create high-impact training event and networking program for the people and organizations that work with startup and early-stage companies. I'm honored to have you on the stage. Please welcome Mr. Tom Strodtbeck from Strodtbeck and Company Limited.
Hi. I think I'm in between you and dinner. I guess I'm in between my own dinner too. My name is Tom Strodtbeck, and as I was introduced, and I run a company called Strodtbeck and Company Limited. It's actually based in Liverpool in the United Kingdom, where I moved in 2009. But as you can tell by my accent, I'm not from Liverpool. I'm actually from Ohio, near Cincinnati, Ohio. And when I prepared the talk and sent my title to the organizers here, I started writing it, and it became something a little bit different than talking about gardening. So I couldn't get the change of title in. I found myself writing about things that I know, which is music and rock music, and not so much about gardening, which I don't know anything about. So it's the same theme, more or less. It's the same ideas, but we're going to use a music metaphor than a gardening metaphor. However, I thought I would at least tell you where the title came from, and it came from a guy named Tom Walker, who runs a program called Rev 1 Ventures in Columbus, Ohio. It's right in the middle of the state. Rev 1 Ventures is the largest active VC in the state of Ohio. It's a terrific program. And what Tom said about building entrepreneurial ecosystems, I feel very strongly that in order to fuel startups, you must connect the assets in your own back garden. Now, quick question, who are you what you might call entrepreneurial enablers? You like work with entrepreneurs, university, incubator, accelerator, investor. Who are you? Government. So we've got a few. This is the only thing I'm going to say about you. However, what I will say is that this is incredibly important, and it is not easy. It's like one of those things that should be self-evident, that universities would work together, governments would work together, and they don't automatically, naturally. It's something that needs to be encouraged and cultivated, and when it's done well, places like Bangkok, Thailand, Southeast Asia, Liverpool can become dynamic ecosystems. And Rev 1 is a great example. Tom's a friend, and you need an introduction, let me know. Okay. My interest in music is probably like a lot of you. How many are music fans? Yeah, come on. I should ask the question. Who here does not like music at all? Get those hands up. That's like not liking food. Anyway, my background in music was my undergraduate. In the 1980s, I studied French horn at Ohio University. And I wasn't very good, so I had to do something else. And about 12 years ago, I got into entrepreneurship, working for an association of business incubators, about 800 programs around the world. That's where I got my start, working and training people how to run business incubators. Later, I worked briefly with the Global Accelerator Network, worked with some other networks in Europe, looking at ways that people can form programs to help entrepreneurs. And as I was doing that, I realized there were so many similarities, so many parallels between music and entrepreneurship. And in the development of an ecosystem, the parallels are really striking. And we're going to talk, a biggest commonality between entrepreneurship and music is that they both cluster. Music clusters. Musical ideas, musical themes, music theory, all cluster around places and specific times. So whether you're studying Thai folk music or Thai popular music, you see clusters of ideas coming together, and they're coming together because people like them. They like listening to what is happening in the day. And that's what happens with entrepreneurship too. And those clusters become self-feeding, and they create even better, cooler, newer ideas. And I've always found that really, really fascinating, how music clusters. Now, Who are my rock and roll fans? Who are my rock fans here? And who knows these bands? Some of you know. Where are they from? If you know. So these are the seminal bands of the Seattle grunge scene that started mid-'80s and kind of went through into the mid-'90s. That's Nirvana, of course, and in the middle, Soundgarden. Chris Cornell just died, unfortunately. On the end, Pearl Jam. I could have put Alice in Chains up there, but the emergence of the Seattle grunge scene created this kind of new sound that people really, really liked. I wouldn't call it appealing because it's kind of heavy, really. But liked it, became very, very popular, and it started to influence bands outside of Seattle. So if you identify, say, the Stone Temple Pilots are a band in San Diego that was kind of a grungy band. Some people think Smashing Pumpkins, which is out of Chicago, I think, is a grungy band because people were listening and learning and digging these songs. Now, grunge, and among other musical clusters, influenced these guys. Do you know who these are? Who knows who these are? Modern Dog. I've really come to like Modern Dog as I was researching Thai music. And Modern Dog, that's Silly, who is this on the end? Silly Fools, right? They're Silly Fools. And middle, Secloso. He played at Glastonbury in 2015, by the way, the big music festival in Britain. And these bands, when I started reading about it and listening to them, you could hear the influence of grunge in their music. You heard influences of a lot of things in their music, and when I read interviews with all of them, they would talk about the bands that influenced them. So Modern Dog, for instance, they all quoted grunge, they quoted the Red Hot Chili Peppers, all music that I was listening to in the 90s, but I wasn't listening to them, and they all emerged on the Thai scene and kind of created this Thai alternative music scene. And that's how music clusters work. Entrepreneurial clusters work in a very similar way, and it wouldn't be wrong for you if you're an entrepreneur. And how many entrepreneurs do we have here? We have some entrepreneurs here. Great. It would not be wrong or inaccurate for you to be thinking that you are creating a scene similar to the grunge scene out of Seattle, or some of the alternative scenes that have risen up in the 1990s in England. There was an emergence of some really cool Manchester-based bands. Stone Roses were one of them. Happy Mondays were one of them, called Manchester. You would be right to think about the entrepreneurial scene that you're creating as being similar to and as dynamic as these music scenes. Of course, you know the big clusters of entrepreneurs, and we're working on the Thai one as part of this event. But Silicon Valley, New York, London, Shanghai, and a few others, but those are the big ones. So this is our goal from this presentation, or actually, it's not from this presentation, this whole event. The goal is to create this dynamic, creative scene. So I'm going to show you how they do it in music, and then you're going to apply it to entrepreneurship. So the first thing to talk about is the power of the campus. Now, some of you are associated with universities, and one thing I would suggest you look at is a paper that came out in March of this year, March 2017, that was published by the University of Chicago, called The Campus as Entrepreneurial Enabler. It was done by a guy I know kind of peripherally named Zoltan Axe, who heads up a program called JEDI, the Global Entrepreneurship Development Index. And he talks about the emergence of high-growth companies from a campus environment. Not necessarily from the entrepreneurial programming in a campus environment, but how the campus environment encourages entrepreneurial growth. So again, University of Chicago, Campus is Entrepreneurial Enabler. These three bands, Modern Dog, you all know this is Coldplay, came out, friends from University College London. That's the great rap band Public Enemy. If you know Public Enemy, Chuck D and Flava Flav met at a college in Long Island called Adelphi University. And if you know Public Money, I have a hard time imagining Flava Flav in college, to be honest. But colleges are real incubators for music, and there's tons of bands that met in college. REM, the great alternative band of the 80s in the United States, met in college in Georgia, in Athens, Georgia. Universities have spun out some of the biggest companies in the world. Then spinning out is the wrong word. I shouldn't say that. On university campuses, some of the biggest companies in the world today were formed by students meeting with each other and coming up with ideas. Of course, everybody knows Facebook. Dropbox was a campus-based company. Reddit, Napster, WordPress, Snapchat, and many, many others came out of these creative environments. And so the question is, why? How did that happen? Well, Axe and others who worked on the paper really started to explore the kinds of things that people do anyway in college. It's a very, very open environment, right? And for many of us, and certainly me, I met people from all over the world that in fact, I hate to say this, Andy's sitting here, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but 2 of my roommates in 1984 in college were from Malaysia, from KL. In 1984, this is how dumb I was. I didn't even know there was a Malaysia in 1984, and all of a sudden I'm meeting 2 people, 2 students, science students at a high university from Malaysia. That opened my mind to a world I didn't even know existed. And that happens to most college students. There's a sense of liberty when you go to college. There's a sense of possibility when you go to college. And those things drive entrepreneurship as well as the assets that universities have, the spaces, the programs, the education, the professors, and all that. So universities are a real driver. But the question now is whether or not communities like Bangkok, KL, Liverpool, and others can kind of create that campus environment where people see really cool things, meet really cool people that they didn't know, have this diverse ideas, out of which can come really cool companies. So that's the first thing. That's the first parallel between music and entrepreneurship. And the second one is openness. Now, music fans know who this is, right? The first great Seattle rocker, Jimi Hendrix, grew up in Seattle. And Jimmy had a hard time in the United States in the 1960s. It was not a great thing to be black in the United States in the 1960s. And in 1967, he moved to London. And that's where he did his best work. Eventually, he died in the Isle of Wight in 1970. But in those 3 years, those were the peak creative years of Jimi Hendrix. But what was interesting about Jimmy, it was also a time of great guitarists in London. Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck were all on the scene. Dave Gilmour joined Pink Floyd in 1967. By the way, they toured together, Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix, which must have been the greatest tour ever. They played all these clubs in London. Jimmy expanded because he was welcomed, and he contributed to the London guitar ecosystem because of their willingness to accept them. Everybody but Jeff Beck, by the way. For you rock fans, Jeff Beck had a hard time with Jimi Hendrix because Jeff Beck's one of the greatest guitarists ever, and he felt like he could never be as good as Jimi Hendrix. But for entrepreneurs, they benefit in the same way. It would take 30 minutes for me to talk about all the American-based technology companies that has a foreign-born or the child of a foreign-born person. Immigration is the driver of American entrepreneurship. 50% of the highest growing companies in the United States, the newest high-growth companies, have an immigrant founder or a founder that's the child of an immigrant, including Apple. Steve Jobs' father was Syrian. Tesla, of course, Google, Skype, I could mention Yahoo, I could mention Facebook, and many, many others. And the willingness of a community to be open to new people, new ideas, is incredibly important. And I have to say, that's why, this is my first trip to Bangkok. And that's a shame, because I should have come here long ago. It's an awesome city. But I get the sense that Bangkok is open to new ideas and new places. And of course, there's surrounded by countries that speak different languages with different cultures, and that is an asset. It's a huge asset. If Thailand, Bangkok, and the rest of Thailand, and I know there's a Thailand outside of Bangkok, is going to establish itself as one of the great clusters of entrepreneurial activity. But it's incredibly important, and it is a huge driver, and it most certainly is an incredible competitive advantages for the places that are really, really open. I think that's why London is such a strong entrepreneurial place, because London is truly an international city where people from all over the world live. Now, the demo tape. So, I was going to make a joke about my wife at this stage, and she sent me a message before I got up there saying, I'm watching you on Facebook Live. But I'm going to tell the joke anyway. My wife loves Adele. She loves Adele so much that if Adele were to call her today and say, hey, look, if you divorce that American, I'm standing in front of you right now. But I love Adele too. She's great. Do you know how Adele got her start? One of Adele's friends in 2006 filmed her playing guitar and singing when she was 16 years old and posted it on MySpace, of all things. There was this thing called MySpace. It was kind of like Facebook, kind of weird. Not a Facebook, except it was like a pickup bar. But anyway, a recording company in London, XL Recordings, got it and signed her. And, you know, the rest is history. She's such a great singer and a great songwriter and great person. XL Recordings, by the way, is an independent label, but Radiohead is one of they're pretty good, right? If Radiohead is in your portfolio, you're good. Beck is one of their company, or one of their artists and things like that. Anyway, the demo tape is a music thing. The demo tape, and now it's YouTube. Do you know who was probably the most successful artist off of YouTube? Maybe we're too old of a crowd here. The Biebs. Justin Bieber was discovered on YouTube. This is something that I think entrepreneurs have a challenge with. Because when you're a musician, you got to go out and perform. You got to play, even if you're not ready, even if it's a handheld phone recording in a terrible way when you're 16 sitting at a desk playing like Adele was. You go out and play. You go to open mics, and you have to have people hear you. And it's the same thing with entrepreneurs. In my little over a decade of working with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial programs, I kind of feel like this is the most lasting theory, mindset into entrepreneurship. It really started in 2002 with Steve Blank's 4 Steps to the Epiphany, where he came out, an engineer by trade, and told entrepreneurs that you build your products from your customer. You don't build a product and give it to them. But instead, they inform you on what they want and what they don't, in a process called customer discovery, customer validation. Eric Ries, when he ran a startup, had Steve Blank on his board. He adopted those strategies into the lean startup. And really, I kind of feel like that's at the heart of the business model canvas, which was 2012, where you're putting all your guesses of what customers want in one place and then going out and talking to them. Now, for people who work in entrepreneurship, this is pretty clear. It seems pretty obvious. For musicians, that's how you know if people like your music or you're not. Unfortunately for me, they didn't like it. Entrepreneurs have a hard time doing this. They want it to be perfect before they go out, or they're afraid that someone's going to steal their idea. That happens a lot too. And for those of us who work with entrepreneurs, certainly anybody who's a VC or an angel know, this is where the magic happens. This is where you decide as an entrepreneur if your sound is going to have traction, if your audience is going to like what you do and like it enough to pay for it. If you're an entrepreneur, I'd read the Startup Owner's Manual, which is another Steve Blank book that I put up there. That's better. It's kind of thick. And learn about the processes of customer discovery, of customer validation, the terms MVP, which was introduced by Eric Ries, the minimum viable product, and so forth, and learn about growth hacking and customer engagement and polling and all the kind of stuff that you do early in your product development so you're building the right thing. If we're using a music metaphor, that you're building a sound that people are gonna want to listen to. And that's really, really important. The world is full of musicians that nobody gets and nobody wants to listen to, that they think are great. The musicians themselves think they're wonderful, but nobody wants it. And I would dare say, for those of you who've worked with entrepreneurs for a long time, the tech world is full of technologies where the founders loved and nobody else did. Got it? Okay. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, because on the first day of the program, I was trying to think who it was. It was from a technology association in Thailand, and it was talking about the growth of Thai technology entrepreneurship from 2010 to now, and it's been exponential. It's an exciting, dynamic, cool ecosystem in Thailand, and it's growing rapidly. And at some point, you're going to hit a big one, and it's going to be great. And I think the lesson for them, and I'm hoping that I'm talking to you now, is to give back. Now, these are the three great American hip-hop artists. I think they're the best in hip-hop. I kind of like hip-hop. Over there, Sean Puffy Combs, Dirty Diddy Money, I think is what he's calling himself now. I think that's a ridiculous thing, so I call him Sean Puffy Combs. In the middle, Jay-Z. And on the end, Dr. Dre, who, and interestingly enough, not only are they all musicians, they're all entrepreneurs, Sean John, Rockaware, and some of you probably have Beats headwear that Apple bought, 2 years ago for $3.1 billion. So what's interesting, in fact, this is what's interesting about hip-hop in general. Hip-hop artists work with each other all the time. And when you buy a hip-hop album by Jay-Z, there's going to be 10 other artists on it. Sean Combs is going to be on it. Mary J. Blige is going to be on it. He's going to do an album or a song with Rick Ross and with Nicki Minaj, Monster, and Kanye West. And they've all supported the growth of artists. Dr. Dre supported Snoop Dogg, supported Eminem, produced him, co-wrote songs with Eminem. They've given back so much to rap, and it's a huge, I really, really like rap. And it's a big part of hip-hop and rap. And as I'm working on this, I was really kind of amazed. It's really unique in American music. Artists work together, rock artists work together, but not like rappers do. They do stuff together all the time, and every new album has artists of different artists. And it's create this really dynamic, and I think the fastest moving American music style and the most dynamic of the past 20 years is rap. Of course, you have Joey Boy, who I listen to. How many Joey Boy fans do we have? Nobody? Okay, good, because I kind of liked him. I was like, that was really, really cool. Giving back is what really drives the growth of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. When I go out and I talk, people will talk about in their community that they want the next Google, and they want the next Facebook. Or I'll hear policymakers talk about how do we get the next Google, or how we get the next Facebook. That isn't who you want. You want Fairchild. You want Fairchild Semiconductor. Now, who here, and I just show your hands, who here has heard of or know Fairchild Semiconductors? Anybody? We've got a few. This is the most important company in Silicon Valley history, without question. Founded by a group of technologists that had been moved out to Silicon Valley by a guy named William Shockley, and led by a guy named Robert Noyce. They founded Fairchild Semiconductors right around the time that semiconductors were being put on silicon chips. In fact, Robert Noyce shared a Nobel Prize for the discovery of the silicon chip with a scientist whose name I don't know, who was at Texas Instruments, which was the big competing technology firm at the time. And Fairchild went on to spin off of Endeavor, which has been referred to, the organization Endeavor did a study in 2014 right now, the 130 fastest growing and largest Silicon Valley firms, 70 of them have a founder or direct connection to Fairchild. And those 70 firms are worth $2.1 trillion. They have had remarkable impact on Silicon Valley. Fairchild, Robert Noyce, and Gordon Moore went on to found Intel, where everyone knows Intel. If you're a computer scientist or know computers, you know Gordon Moore because he was the guy that wrote Moore's Law about the doubling of components on a silicon chip every 18 months, every 2 years, or whatever it was. A lot of people talk about Moore's Law, or Moore's Law in different ways. If you know the Valley's investment community, you've probably heard of Kleiner Perkins Caulfield, Eugene Kleiner, Sequoia Capital. Don Valentine was the marketing manager of Fairchild. They're an incredibly important company, and these are the symbols of companies that have connections to Fairchild, including Apple, Google, Oracle, Facebook, there's Intel, Cisco, eBay, Yahoo. So you don't want Facebook. You want these guys. So, this is the last thing I have to say. Because things like this are really startups, I'm encouraging startups to go and talk about your startups at things like this. Go to pitch competitions. If you don't win, it doesn't matter. You're pitching, and that's the thing that matters. You're getting feedback on what you're talking about. You're learning from people like each other, like me, I hope, on how your startups can be improved and how your idea can be explored in different ways. I'm not a musician anymore, and the reason I'm not a musician anymore is nobody liked hearing me play. I didn't even like hearing me play, so I had to find something else to do. For you as entrepreneurs, the great thing is that your idea that you have now isn't going to be the last idea that you have. Hopefully it'll be successful. But if it's not, you can always move on. We're talking at lunch today about the importance of failure. But a friend of mine in Georgia, the country, not the state, uses a different metaphor. He says you have to fold. You have to be willing to fold. It's like a poker game. And once you have a hand that isn't going to work for you, you fold it so you still have chips to play the next hand. You fold before you lose everything. And that's what we encourage you to do, to get your ideas out there, share them with your peers. I go to these events, go to the hackathons, and get those ideas out there and share them with each other. So that's my presentation. I was on time, which is nice. The last thing I'll say is I really appreciate for the organizers of the event having me here. It's been a terrific event. And one thing about, and I really believe this, one thing about working in entrepreneurship is that it, for lack of a better word, gives you hope, right? The world is a complicated place, you know. I'm an American. I know how complicated the world has become over the past 8 months. But when you spend time with entrepreneurs, and I am fortunate enough to spend time with a lot of entrepreneurs, you see so many people that are just trying to get good ideas to make people's lives better. That's the core of entrepreneurship, really, making people's lives better. And I find it kind of a privilege at this point in my life to be able to come to things like this and listen to the folks in the hall share with me their ideas. A lot of them are great. Are all of them great? No, but it doesn't matter. There's still ideas that can be turned into something of value to people all over the world. And it's a great part of my life, and I really, really appreciate being part of it. I appreciate being able to share all this stuff with you. I hope it was helpful. I hope you have a great night, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Well, you're always fabulous, and thank you to you, Tom.